There were certain sort of strengths I felt like I had or interests I had, but I just never knew how to formulate it into a job. Knowing that I wasn't super zoned in on what I wanted to do, I was really looking for the place and less the position. I don't really know if I expected to go through 7 rounds of interviews, but it was so well worth it.
Well, hey friends, welcome to the One Step Podcast, where we're highlighting stories of changemakers in different fields, where you can get practical insights for your one step, whether you're first or you're next, in order to create change. And today, we have the special honor to have a great guest. Mother Teresa called in and she said, listen, I have seen a lot. Yet I have never quite found someone just like Annalise. The evidence, the epitome of humility, compassion, and putting all her heart towards her work. Please make some noise for Annalise Bourgeois.
Thank you. That was an insane intro. I loved it. Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
It is definitely giving where credit is due. And for real, Annalise, thank you so much for just spending some time just to have some great conversation. I know our listeners are going to be very encouraged just to hear out of your own story. I know that you spent a lot of time over at Charity Water. Thank you just so much again for making the time to be here.
Of course. You've been such an important part of our community. For those of you who don't know, Jonathan is an amazing supporter of ours, and he's been so active and willing to participate. He comes and speaks at our events and makes us look good. So this is just me returning the favor.
I appreciate it. As I was looking forward to this conversation, I do think it is something special to hear from someone who is managing the front lines. And I'm definitely interested to learn more from your perspective, really your story that led you to being at Charity Water, what kept you there. And so for listeners who may not be as aware, I'd love to just hear, what is your background? What is your story in the previous chapters prior to Charity Water?
Yeah, so Charity Water is actually my first job out of college. And so I feel like I kind of struck gold really quickly, and I feel really grateful for that. So I moved to New York City about 10 years ago to go to school, and I was going to the King's College, which is about 15 minutes south, the old Tribeca Charity Water office. So it was really close by, and one of my friends was actually interning at Charity Water at the time, and she was saying so many good things about just the culture, about, Scott and the work and the mission. And there was this opportunity for a front desk receptionist that was opening up. And at the time, I think at school, there were certain sort of strengths I felt like I had or interests I had, but I just never knew how to formulate it into a job. And knowing that I wasn't super zoned in on what I wanted to do, I was really looking for the place and less the position. Although I was super excited about the front desk receptionist, just being able to greet people when they come in the door. And I don't really know if I expected to go through 7 rounds of interviews for a receptionist position, but it was so well worth it. And I got to meet so many members of the team and immediately felt what my friend had shared of just like how excellent the people are there. And I really knew just from the interview process that I'd be able to learn a lot. And so I started at Charity Water about 6.5 years ago. And along the way, I've been able to grow a lot, learn a lot, work on a lot of different initiatives. And now I manage our supporter experience team, who is sort of responsible for all of the engagement, events, experience, customer service for all of our mass donors, which is just anyone giving $10,000 or less. So it's about 100,000 people, and we're a growing community, and we're always looking for ways to grow. But yeah, it's been kind of a wild ride.
That's definitely a long journey.
Yeah. Not common at my age, I think, to be an organization for that long, but it's been really amazing, and I've really enjoyed my time here.
I've spoken about Charity Water plenty of times on this podcast, but especially for listeners who are listening for the first time, can you talk a little bit about what the Charity Water model is, its overall mission, and what your role that you see that you play a part in?
Yeah, so Charity Water as an organization is focused on bringing clean and safe drinking water to people around the world. Right now, we're focused in Africa, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. And the coolest part about our work, to me, is that we work through local implementing partners to implement all of our work. So there's a group of, I want to say we have between 45 country programs right now. And that's with different organizations in different parts of the world. And so there's all these people who are sort of implementing these projects that work in those countries that know the context of where they're working. They understand the solutions. They're innovators. They're passionate about the work. They have relationships with the community. So that's sort of a unique identifier. And then you touched a little bit on our model, our 100% model. 100% of public donations go directly to clean water projects because we have a group of individuals and families who fund all of the operating costs. So my salary, staff flights, we even pay back credit card fees on those water donations to make sure that it is 100% going to clean water projects. And my role has really been in the customer service side, working with our supporters. You know, we talked before we started recording about excellence. We care a lot about making sure that people enjoy their experience giving to Charity Water, whether they need to cancel their monthly donation or they want to upgrade their gift or they want to start a fundraiser, whatever that touch point is for them. We want to make sure it's really enjoyable. And we also want to make sure that our supporters feel supported. We had a supporter reach out to us recently and they were filming this video for their fundraiser and we said, oh, let us draft up some speaking points for you. And we really want to arm our supporters with the tools that they need to be successful, whether it's fundraising, talking about our work, being able to share about it with a friend or a family. And we also treat everyone like family. You know, they're part of our family. They're part of this big community of people that are important and integral to making our work possible. When we celebrated 15 million people served a few years ago, I was really thinking about all the different people who have made sacrifices, who gotten involved over the years that really are a part of that big milestone. It's our local partners, it's people like you donating and running the marathon for Charity Water, it's young kids doing school projects on the water crisis, it's community members being a part of their water sanitation and hygiene committee. It was Scott putting in 100 hours a week years ago to make this whole thing possible. So I think there's just something really beautiful in all the different sort of people that it takes to make our work possible. Yeah.
That's amazing. You bring up a good point that is not common for people of our demographic to stay at a job for that long. Yeah. I'm curious to hear what kept you at Charity Water for this long of a duration.
Yeah, I think for me, I felt like my role really shifted a lot, and I felt like I was really working almost at 5 different businesses and organizations. And I recently hired someone new, and when I was training them and giving them sort of the history of our function and the supporter experience function, I talked a lot about how our function has really changed with what the focus of the business has been. So when our focus was fundraisers, our activities and our work look like this. When our focus has been on the monthly giving program, our work has looked like this. You know, now as a business, we're really focused on the future and how are we sort of building a machine and building a business that is going to really scale in the way that we're hoping to grow. So I think for me, what's kept me there is it's always been really interesting. You know, I've had maybe 5 or 6 managers. I've been on probably 4 or 5 departments. And so I felt like I was always learning something new, and that's really kept me engaged for as long as I have. And then I would say being able to see the impact of our work as a Charity Water employee, after working there for a year, we were able to go with a small group of us to the field and really just experience our work, get to meet some of our local partners who are incredible, who implement all of our work. And so I think just feeling connected to what I'm doing. I could go on. And then I would say the last one, I'll just put this in there, is that, you know, it's people like you, Jonathan. It's getting to meet the people who are really making our organization run and getting to know their stories and see all the different ways that people connect to our work. Maybe it's they're really interested in the model. Maybe they really care about water. Maybe they're just interested in the way that we do storytelling and our brand. Maybe they're really interested in our programmatic work and our sensor work. It's really different for everyone, and I love the idea of people coming from all walks of life who have different interests, sort of focused on one thing. And yeah, I feel like when I started at Charity Water, I had one of my managers at the time said, she was like, just so you know, there's nowhere to go but down from here. And I don't necessarily believe that that's true, but I do know how special the organization is and the people that I work with are. So
that is so good. As I've observed Charity Water over the years, it's been amazing to see how Charity Water has been able to draw people of all walks of life in order to be unified on this cause of bringing a solution to the water crisis. And while doing so, having a standard of excellence to the same caliber, to the same quality as you would see like major brands like Apple or Nike, that it wasn't a model or an approach that, hey, how can we guilt donors to be a part of this mission, but instead, how can we inspire and really cast vision and draw unity around this issue, around this subject, in order to bring a solution. And so I have a lot of respect, not just on the public facing side of things, but just from my interaction with you and the team at Charity Water. It's been amazing to see that same excellence carry through on the back end of things as well. And so from the bottom of my heart, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for having the due diligence and to carry your work with excellence to inspire not just many other people, but myself included.
Aw, you're so sweet, Jonathan. I mean, again, I should be thanking you. I wouldn't have a job if people didn't care about our work.
Well, thank God people do, and thank God you have your job. But speaking of jobs, you mentioned how Charity Water was the first job that you had coming out of college. A lot of our listeners are currently in college, coming out of college themselves, and are trying to figure out how to navigate into what their next chapter might be. I would love to hear a little bit more, if you could get a little bit more specific as far as to what did you do to prepare for those 7 interviews? Yeah, I know, and I know a little bit about it, but I'd love to our listeners to hear more of that story. What were the things that you've done to really navigate and finding out that this is the place that I want to plant myself in?
Yeah, it's such a scary thing to think about. Like, I feel like the visual way to think about it is college is like you're on this little plateau, and then all of a sudden you graduate and there's just this little drop off where it's like, okay, now I need to figure out where I'm going and what I want to do, and it can just feel really scary. And I think whenever I feel seasons of uncertainty or I'm scared, I go into just like hard work, preparation, researching as many businesses as I could. And so I think specifically for those interviews, I read every annual report. I knew everything that was on their social media. I talked to my friend who had worked there and I said, please, any insights that you have. I wanted to know everything about the business before I even stepped into the interview, so that I felt like even if they mentioned something in passing once, I would have the context about what they were speaking about so that I could speak to what they had mentioned in an interview or they were asking me. I think more broadly, the way that I would encourage, like in retrospect, I would encourage a recent grad to think about how they're navigating the first part of their career is to really look at what are you trying to optimize for? What season are you in your life? Are you in a season where, hey, I actually can work 100 hours a week and I want to optimize for paying my student loans off as quickly as I possibly can? Or actually, like for me, I mentioned, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I really wanted to be in an environment that was flexible, where I could learn a lot. I could see an organization in success and learn from that. And so that was a season of life that I was in, and I wanted to work on something that I was passionate about. Sometimes people say, hey, I actually don't need to be passionate about my work. My work is, I clock in at 9, I leave at 5. And my passion is I have this Etsy shop that I run on the side. And everyone's sort of work life and career can look really different depending on what they're optimizing for and what they really value at the time. And then know that your career is always going to have different seasons where you're optimizing for something different. So right now, I don't have any kids, so I'm optimizing for something different than when I have kids. And the way that I think about my career or the role or the company is all going to be different surrounding sort of my circumstances. The perfect example is that one of my best friends is a teacher, and she has summers off, which is such a great benefit to being a teacher, but she also has a really strict schedule. There's no flexibility. You can't just decide, oh, I'm not, feeling good today. I can't go in. It's like, no, like you have to go in every single day. You can't say, oh, I think I want to take a Friday off, take a long weekend. There's school, So while that benefit of having 2 months off, the sacrifice is you lack that structure during the year. And I think there's trade-offs to everything, and you just need to figure out, sort of plot it out, like jot out, like what are the things that I care about? What are the things that I'm looking for? and see if you can really optimize for those things.
Those are really practical insights. I'm curious to hear it looking back. You obviously prepared a lot for those interviews. I remember one of your executives says, like, that's a little much. I'm just curious to hear, was it ever pointed out what that did for you? If there was whether one interview or one quality that you had that others noticed and said, hey, because of this, we knew that you're right for the role or to join our organization.
That's a good question. I don't think the preparation was pointed out, but I felt more confident going into the interview knowing that I had prepared. And some people can be confident because they just have confidence. That's just not me. I don't, when I do these events that you've been at and I'm speaking or I'm pushing the deck or I'm presenting, I need to prepare for me to be able to show up in that moment and feel really confident about what I'm doing. But I just know that the preparation, even if it wasn't called out by them, made me feel really confident within the interview process.
I could absolutely see how having that attitude of just eagerness and hunger to learn and to make an impact definitely showed and carried through. And I'm without a doubt confident that that absolutely played a part in just how you've been able to serve over these many years being at Charity Water. With that being said, being at Charity Water for all these different years, I'm curious to hear, Annalise, what have been the most impactful lessons that you've been able to learn during your time there?
So many. I mean, 6.5 years, you learned so much. I think, as I was sort of reflecting or like thinking, preparing for this conversation with you, I was thinking about just the time. And have you ever heard that when people talk about marriage, they're saying, I wasn't married to one person, I was married to like 5 different people?
Yeah.
I
Yep.
feel that same way about work. I feel like I mentioned earlier in this conversation, I feel like I've worked at a lot of different types of places. And I think that again, I'm optimizing for experience. I'm optimizing for being able to have flexibility to do things that maybe have ownership over work that maybe I don't have history of owning, being given opportunities. And I think that I've just learned a lot about resilience, about how to navigate through organizational change, through downs, through ups, work through conflict, work through just everything that comes with being in the same way, being in a long-term relationship. There's ups and there's downs and there's compromises. And I feel really happy and proud of working through that at Charity Water and knowing that not every day was perfect and not every day was the best day of work ever. But I always showed up feeling like I'm loving what I'm doing. This organization is amazing. And we're going to be able to push through this thing. Whether it's we need to do this project that we've never done before, how are we going to do that? Or we're shifting our focus as a business, or hey, we actually want you to have this manager, and learning a new person and having to work with a new manager. Like there's so much change that happens in that much time. And I think sort of the really beautiful side of that is getting to see a lot of my work or work that I've been a part of through to the end. I think when people are at a business or an organization for a year, 2 years, you try a couple things and then you leave and you're on to the next. It's so beautiful and so cool to be able to see something come to life that you've been dreaming about for 4 years.
Man.
This is such a silly example, but I was talking to this woman on my team who's amazing. Her name's Kathy. And we were talking about a couple features that we were requesting with engineering. And I said, I remember the day when we couldn't merge accounts, and it's just being able to see, I remember the pain of how hard it was when we couldn't do this thing. And now we can do this thing. Or I remember when, all of our macros were outdated and it made it super hard to like give people responses. And it took so much time to seeing our response time just completely diminish because we've invested the resources into improving that part of the business. It's so satisfying to see the effects of your work and to see the value that you're able to like deliver to the end user. So anyways, long story short, I think just the resilience and the discipline that's, gained by being in a place for a long time and then also being able to see work through the end.
Yeah. Yeah. As you're sharing your story, Annalise, I think one quality I'm noticing is just your level of commitment. the commitment that you had in order to prepare for interviews, to go above and beyond in doing so, and to join an organization with impact, to join with excellence and success, and also your level of commitment to see things through that carried you all these different years. As I mentioned before, like, it is not common for our younger generation to be committed in one organization for several years. If anything, it's 1 to 2 years. That's the average. And then, like you said, jump ship and move on to the next chapter of their lives. Nothing necessarily completely wrong with that. But as you said best, I do think there is something special, something unique when it comes to being committed to see something through for the long term. And who knows what the chapters ahead might hold. However, the fact that you were committed enough to see, to be invested, to be planted, and to experience the growth and the fruit of doing so is super encouraging to hear. Go ahead.
Oh, just quickly on that. I mean, going back to what I was saying about what are you optimizing for? The people who are jumping ship every 2 years might be optimizing for something completely different than I am. And I think there's so much to learn in both. And maybe there's a season in my life where I'm going to be the 2-year person. I don't know. And maybe there's a season in someone's life who they go to that every 2 years, going to a different place, and then they're going to say, hey, I found my place that I want to have my long stretch in. So definitely, this season of my life, this just really made sense. And I've really, again, enjoyed my time.
No, that's a great perspective. And I think that's a special framework that could help give some pressure off of people who are in either season. I think just having the perspective of what am I optimizing for can help people navigate through whatever chapter they might find themselves currently. Those are really great insights. We actually have a question from one of our listeners.
Hi, my name is Joanne and I'm from Florida. My question is, how do you approach your supervisor when it comes to making changes in your organization?
I love this question. Good question, Joanne. I've had a couple of opportunities over the years to sort of advocate for a change, or times where I've approached either my manager or the executive team on work that I'd like to see come to fruition, or a project, or a new idea, a new hire. And I think, again, kind of going back to what I said before, like, that preparation is key. And whenever I've had conversations with a manager, maybe about a new hire or anything like this, I've always taken the time to really sort out all of my thoughts and really get to the why of why I want to do this. And if I ever found that what I was advocating for was just for me, like was self-serving, then I knew that it wasn't the right thing to be advocating for. And that when you're at work, in my personal opinion, and everyone can think about this differently, I think that when you're advocating for something, you need to make sure that you're aligning your personal values or your personal desires of what you might want to see with the business's priorities, bottom line, value they might be missing out on. And I think the times where I've been able to successfully advocate for something is when I was able to properly either say, hey, this is what we're missing out on, and if we do it this way, this is the value that I think that we'll be able to glean, and sort of aligning that with, hey, this would be something I'd be really excited to work on, or I really need extra support and I need a new hire. And then the other thing for me is I think it's important to provide documentation. Whenever I've done this, I've either created a pitch deck, I've created a spreadsheet, maybe I've outlined my feelings or thoughts in an email. And I think it's important to give your manager, the business executives, whomever it is, time to digest what you're saying. So I always give a heads up, hey, I'd like to talk about X. Get to that meeting, talk about X. Hey, in follow-up, here's what I shared today if you want more time to mull it over. And then ultimately knowing that the decision isn't up to me, and depending on what you're advocating for, you need to also know, like, is this a decision that if it's not made, I'm going to say, hey, I actually don't think I want to continue here, and I need to move on to something else? Or is this something you're advocating for, but you'll be okay if it comes back as a no? Because whenever you're advocating for something, sometimes it's going to be yes, and sometimes it's going to be a no, and that's just life. And then my last point on that, and that is that timing is everything, and sometimes you can make the right ask at the wrong time. And so really try to understand the landscape of the business, where you are at in your planning cycle. I've encouraged other colleagues when they've asked, how did you get a new hire? Well, this is the time of year where they budget for it. So try to understand the context and make sure that you're making the ask at the right time. And, I've only learned some of those things by making a ton of mistakes related to this. So
That's really good. And I'm glad you included that last portion. I know one reason why many people would be hesitant in order to approach their supervisor or their manager with that level of preparation is for the chance of being rejected and asking themselves, well, why am I going to prepare so much if it has the chance to be rejected anyways? But just your response to that, I think absolutely is fully encompassing. And I think just gives great light and perspective in how to approach it as best as possible.
And I think kind of going back to what you're saying, I think that if you don't prepare, if you just say like, you just show up one day to your one-on-one and you're like, hey, I want a promotion. Well, why? What would a promotion mean? What would your title be? What would your response? Have you researched what your job description would look like? I think that now being a manager myself, like when someone comes in a meeting and they're prepared, you feel like, okay, they're ready to take on this new responsibility. They've really thought this through. So I think that it always just bodes well to prepare.
That's really good. Another question from a listener.
Hi, my name is Anna and I'm from Florida. My question is, how do you navigate feelings of burnout?
I think it's important to take a step back, take a pause, and try to evaluate, is this burnout something that is a part of the rhythm of the business, or was this a particular pocket of time or season? Times where I felt burnout, there's times where I looked at it and I said, okay, I think there's a rhythm in place for this to continue, and there's something needs to happen in order for me to not feel this way. Other times I've said, okay, this is just going to be a hard month, right? We have a really big push, we have this live event, or we have this initiative, and it's okay if I have a really hard month this month because I know I'm taking a vacation or I'm taking some time to recoup. And that, by the way, is not good for everyone. Some people want to be able to do, again, they're optimizing for their time. I want to be able to come in at 9, I want to leave at 5:30. And that's totally okay. I'm in the season of my life where I'm okay with a difficult month, knowing that there's sort of like a time box of this is when I'm going to have to put in more work and when I'm not. And then if you do realize that you're in sort of that second category where you're in this like rhythm of burnout, look at the rhythm. Why is the rhythm there? Is this rhythm created by you? Like, are you not saying no where you could be saying no? Is this rhythm coming from someone else? Hey, we have this meeting at 8 p.m. and I need you to be there. And then evaluate, check in with yourself, because ultimately I personally believe that you're responsible for making sure that your work environment is good for you, and that employers should have a bias towards making employees as comfortable as possible in the workplace. But there comes a point in time where they have to just set a clear expectation of this is what work looks like here, and you have to decide, like, are you going to opt in or opt out? And I think that's okay. And so for myself, I just looked at what category it was, and then if I felt like I recognized that it was a rhythm, I voiced that and said, hey, I noticed, this work is only getting done if we put in XYZ. Maybe we need a new hire, or maybe we need to look at our prioritization and be working on more high value work. Are there some things on my plate that I'm doing because I feel like I need to be doing, but I don't actually need to be doing? And then if you feel like the business is like, nope, this is what it is, figure out if you need to opt in or opt out.
That's good. That's super helpful, Annalise. Sheesh. One final question I would love to ask you. Obviously, you shared a lot of great insights out of your own story. I would love to ask, with the concept of optimizing for what you desire, what is one step that you would encourage the recent college grad, the person who's navigating perhaps a career change? What is one step that you would encourage them to take when it comes to optimizing for what they desire?
I think it's doing kind of what I said earlier, identify what you do desire. There's times where you might get into a conversation with someone and you're like, oh, I really want to do this thing. And then that opportunity actually comes and you realize, oh, I don't really want to do that thing. So really sit with yourself and say, is this actually what I want to do? I have an example. I really love events, and you've come to some events that I've been able to work on. When I was graduating college, I was talking to our career development department and I was saying, I really want to work in events. She said, do you? do you want to work nights and weekends? And it was just like this really healthy reminder of think hard about what you want to do, because everything comes at a cost. And so choose wisely what you want to do based off of what season you're in. And the other thing is, it's okay to get it wrong. It's okay to, thankfully I don't feel this way, but it would be okay if I spent 6 years doing this and then I say, okay, that was wrong. I need to go to school for something else. Someone who was a manager of mine who was incredible, she decided to switch from her career to doing psychology and wants to be a therapist.
Wow.
It's such a beautiful thing. She said,
Yeah.
this is a change that I'm going to make in my life, and this is something I really want to do. And as someone who was managed by her, I think she'd be amazing at it, because I often felt like our one-on-ones were therapy for me. But that it's okay to change your mind, but to be thoughtful. And don't be too quick with your yes. And be thoughtful about your yeses, and say no more than you think. If you can, if you have the opportunity to say no. There's going to be opportunities that might come up for you, but it's important to really evaluate if it's the right thing for you in your season. And, going back to that whole discipline thing that I talked about with Charity Water, that discipline of getting through that like challenging season and seeing it to the other side. There could have been times years ago where I said, all right, well, this was a hard season. It's that sign to leave,
Yeah.
And just like listen and trust your instincts of like, is this the right season for me to leave? Which feels a little like of a froofy thing for me to say. Maybe a little fluffy, but that's how I feel. Trust your instincts.
No, that's really good. That's really good. I think many of the different previous guests have shared something along the same lines. Essentially, hey, just trust the process. Trust the process. Trust your instincts. Navigating that, you'll know that you will figure it out. And I love what you said, that even if you make a wrong decision, you can still take one step to learn from that, to take a new direction. That if anything, those I wouldn't call it mistakes, but those wrong decisions, so to say, are very informative. Just bring you closer to what is the best decision for what you're optimizing for. So thank you so much, Annalise, just for taking the time just to share such great insights. I know our listeners are going to be encouraged from it. Again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for just the work that you do. It's really inspiring to see the level of excellence and passion that you have. I think it's that a lot of people can be inspired from. And so I'm definitely looking forward to the days ahead. I'm excited to see the impact that we're going to make together.
Of course. Excited to meet you in a few weeks at the NYC Marathon. You're going to do great.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I am definitely looking forward. Thank you for listening to the One Step Podcast. Consider subscribing and follow on social media at One Step Podcast so you don't miss future insights for your one step in creating change. That's the number One Step Podcast. If you would like to be a part of creating change, you can visit onesteppodcast.com/Charity Water. As you are on your journey, trust the process, because change begins and continues with one step.